I'm always surprised that I don't hear about this book. And all the research I've done for over 10 years, I never hear anyone preference this book or like mention it in any kind of way. And it's just weird. I looked into the book a little bit more online and stuff after reading it a couple times, and a lot of people, research-wise, do believe this book is fictional. That Sir Francis Bacon was just writing about a utopia-type civilization and stuff, and giving an example of how natural technology and all this shit could exist, and that technology was the way to a utopian future. So everyone thinks it's fictional, and no one really online talks about the whole Atlantis thing. I don't know why. They focus on just kind of the beginning of the book about, these crazy buildings and these people and stuff from this island that supposedly is fictional. And it could be, but I like to think, what if it was real? And it's kind of like High Brazil. High Brazil was an island that I've talked about on this podcast before, but it existed all the way into the 1800s off the coast of Ireland. They even had it on maps and shit. But now it doesn't exist anymore. And at one point, it was always shrouded in fog. For 7 years at a time, it'd be shrouded in fog, and then the fog would go away for a little bit, and you could actually see the island, and then the fog would come back. So this island is unique as well because every 12 years they allow a voyage, people to go out into the world and explore. That's how they have all the knowledge on the world that they do. They do go and intermix with the world, these island people, but they intermix pretending to be normal people. They dress even like other people from around the world so that they can sail to these places and blend in and learn things about our society and take it back to their society so that they can discuss it and learn it and stuff. But anyways, these people, like I said, they leave the island every 12 years and they just kind of go on little voyages around the world. And I don't know if it's the 12-year thing, but it reminds me of High Brazil. Like I said, that one's 7 years. It lifts up the fog. This one's 12 years. They actually go out into the world and explore. And it also reminds me of Lost. This book in general kind of reminds me of the show Lost, and the fact that this island, has these people on it that protect this light and have a light energy that came out of the fucking ocean. And it's like this island, they say, is the bosom of God himself. So like, this island maybe does have a fucking energy that we can't even comprehend. So let's say it's like High Brazil, where after a while into the 1800s, it disappeared. Maybe it's because we, as humans, our pineal glands became so calcified, or we became so ingrained in this fucking material world that we no longer can see that island. It's physically not there because we physically cannot comprehend it. And so that's how it is maybe with this island. Maybe it did exist and this story is real. But we just can't see it anymore because it's gone, because our minds have gotten too manipulated by this new version of the Bible and from just technology and other things that we've dipped into a little bit too much. But interesting story nonetheless, believe it or not. I don't care. I just thought it'd be a fun little story to tell. And Captain Cook, way back in the day when he was traveling the world, he actually got a lot of islanders in the Pacific sick because, again, no one had really intermixed at that point. So I think that's why at the beginning of this book, when these Englishmen make it to this random island, they've been stranded for a long time and they make it to an island that they've never seen or heard of before. And these people come out to them before they can even make it to the shore. These canoes come out with these dudes in blue robes, and they basically tell these Englishmen their laws and how they need to stay where they are until they're cleared and stuff. And eventually they're cleared to come onto shore, but they're quarantined. And I think they quarantine these Englishmen because these people probably know about all of the things that people like Captain Cook have been doing, not on purpose, but on accident, going to these islands and accidentally infecting them with diseases. So anyway, so they have to stay quarantined for a while. Once they get out of quarantine, out of these little rooms that they were stuck in for a while, they notice this island that they're on is pretty extraordinary. There's really tall buildings and things that they've never really seen before. Colors even. Like I said, all these people were wearing blue robes. They looked very different than people in the real world that, where they're from and stuff. Anyways, they eventually get to know these people. And this is where the book gets interesting, where I got hooked to it and had to keep reading it over and over, because if you listen to this podcast or know me at all, I'm pretty obsessed with Atlantis and ancient secret history and all this. So it's just fascinating that in this book they actually mention that these Englishmen had boats that were nothing compared to the boats, 4,000 years ago. They said over 4,000 years ago, people were traveling the world more so than what they are now in the 1600s, because they had technology and boats that were way beyond what they had in this modern day. But something happened along the line, and shit started back to where it was. Anyways, this island is special, though, because this island contains people from an ancient civilization that survived, supposedly, these cataclysms, and they still have this preserved history on their island of Atlantis, because they speak that when all these people were boating around and traveling the world 4,000 or more years ago, Atlantis was still a thing. And Atlantis is technically America, supposedly. And Mexico was this country known as Terra Ramble. And then Peru was another empire near Atlantis that was known as Koya at the time. So Koya, Tremble, and Atlantis. They were what we know as the Americas at the time. And eventually, these Americas joined in this voyaging, which I don't fully understand. It sounds like America was maybe isolated, like Atlantis was isolated from the rest of the world for a while. And I don't know why that is, but they started getting to the seas and to the oceans a little bit later than the rest of the world, like China, Middle East, and all these places actually were traversing the world way before even Atlantis, supposedly. But obviously China and Middle East, they weren't actually China and Middle East at the time. They were known as Lemuria still. So Lemuria was this continent that actually flourished before Atlantis even did. Atlantis is interesting, though. If you actually look at America, Mexico, and Peru specifically, these three places that these people on this island mention, there's giants everywhere. I know this is crazy and some people don't like this subject, but in the 1800s especially, when people were really digging into America, actually, settling it and building buildings, they were stumbling upon giant skeletons all the time. You can find newspaper articles, like this is how I've found actually most of this information out, is newspaper articles from the 1800s into the early 1900s of people finding these giant skeletons, whether they're 7 foot, 8 foot, sometimes 12 foot. There's a couple in Tennessee that were 20 fucking foot. So there are these giant beings, but they're all over America, especially from the Aleutian Islands, which are off of Alaska, all the way down on the west coast into Mexico, down into South America. I can name you a case in every state or every part of that west coast area. The west coast was filled with these giants. I don't know what the fuck it is, but I think either Lemuria sat there at one point in the Pacific Ocean when it sank, or when it was lost, this giant civilization made it to America where they were isolated, maybe. Or maybe Enki, this Anunnaki god, went from the Middle East where Enlil was kind of in charge, and he started his own thing in America where he created these giants, because supposedly Viracocha, who is a version of Enki down in South America, made giants in, ancient myths and tales at least. So I just wonder, what is up with the giants in America? Does it have something to do with Atlantis? And in the Bible, they talk about flooding, the world to get rid of giants. So is that why Atlantis was sunk or whatever? So these people on this island even say that Plato, the guy who told, the modern world about Atlantis, he was slightly wrong. Supposedly, when he says there's lots of earthquakes and lots of water, all of a sudden, it wasn't so much earthquakes. They said that America wasn't really prone to earthquakes like that, so it was mainly a flood. And so then I wonder, there's this theory that during the Ice Age, this huge ice cap in Canada was hit by meteors, and it flash flooded it. So were these earthquakes that Atlanteans experience, were they just created by these meteors that struck this ice and flash flooded it? And then, after these earthquakes came this flood that flooded America. And apparently, if America got so fucked up by this flood because it's mountainous, there's more rivers, lakes, shit like that. So the flood was a little bit more serious in America because of all this water that was already in America. It just overflowed.